All right.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So now moving on to nutrition. Um, all the things that I have learned about nutrition were, I won't say all the things, but much of what I know about nutrition was learned in a period of time that I set aside. I set aside 6 months to study canine nutrition in order to be able to formulate my RF1 product. I studied all of the available research on canine metabolism, which was initially done starting back in the early 1900s. It was initially done in order to learn about human metabolism because there was a huge amount of crossover. Generally, the truths that were learned about dogs were applicable to humans. And they had this body of research out there that was geared more than anything else towards doing whatever was necessary to learn the truth. And they didn't really care what they did to dogs. There were some dogs that suffered along the way, like if you wanted to learn about the effects on endurance of giving B12 to your dog after a carb loading cycle, they might have the study broken down into with 3 groups, and one of them might get injected B12, one of them might not get any at all, and one of them might get B complex. But the way they would test the actual endurance is they'd put this group of beagles in a water tank and watch to see how long it took them to sink. Of course, that kind of study would not be allowed or shouldn't be allowed today because we take into consideration what the beagle's going through. To me, it makes a difference whether they allowed them to drown or whether they, once they went down, they rescued them and petted them on the head and said, "Sorry, we had to do that. Rest of your life is you got a free pass." But anyway, back in those days, they did those things, and they got very definitive truths. And there's this whole body of research out there that was held to that standard or lack of standard that's available, and it gives, well, it provides meaningful truths about human metabolism. It provides even greater truths about canine metabolism. So I spent 6 months reading all that huge body of research, and I was doing that to the end of identifying every nutrient that had ever been shown to be beneficial to a dog. And not only that, but I needed to identify the ranges, the concentrations, the total amount of each one of these substances that fell into the therapeutic category. And then almost all substances have a toxic category, or toxic level. So we had to identify therapeutic and toxic levels of every nutrient that had ever been shown to be beneficial to a dog. So I did that, and it was eye-opening, and it was enjoyable, and it was it required more self-discipline than I usually have. My mind likes to go where it wants to go, and it doesn't like to be confined to research or where somebody else's mind wanted to go. But sometimes you got to do it in order to achieve your objectives, and so that's what we did. And what I learned from that ultimately went into producing the RF1 product. RF1 standing for research formula, because the truths that we invoked in that formula were the products of reading research. So you'll see that the creation of that product went hand in hand with the discovery of the important information, and all of that is referenced in the conditioning issue of the journal, which I showed you earlier. So the objectives in nourishing your dog and in creating the product, RF1 product, were the same. I wanted to address every way that we could provide energy to a dog as efficiently as possible. Well, in studying that situation, I learned that there are 4 energy substrates, and that is, a substrate in this case means a biochemical pathway that we can provide nutrition for, and the body will turn it into usable energy that will help keep the dog energized while he works. And the the interesting thing, one of the many interesting things, is that how complex the situation is. Whenever a dog or human start out doing work, they start out burning almost exclusively carbohydrate energy. Carbohydrate energy is brought into the body and then stored. Some of it just goes into the bloodstream, provides energy for right now, just as you consume it, but a lot of it is stored as glycogen. Glycogen is just what I just implied, that it is stored carbohydrate energy that can be released to fuel the animal, the person, or the dog during the first 20 to 30 minutes of activity, and then it runs out. It largely runs out. If you don't have another source of energy to take over at that time, then you run into the situation that, a lot of dog guys will say the dog ran hot. Well, that's a real catch-all category that may not have anything to do with temperature. A dog can run hot if they're overweight. Fat is a layer of insulation, and it will keep heat in the body. And a dog will stop, and his tongue will come out, and he'll be breathing hard. And so that's one of the things that make a dog look like he's running hot, actually being hot. Running out of fuel, not having fat energy to take over, that's another thing that'll make a dog act like he's running hot. He'll stop and breathe hard with his tongue hanging out. Being wrongly hydrated, overhydrated, actually is the same as having a layer of fat. You have so much water to the skin that it traps heat. Being underhydrated will cause a dog to fail because blood is thick, doesn't pump as well, doesn't carry oxygen as well. That'll make a dog act like he's hot. Not being fit, not having worked enough to create a level of fitness will make a dog do exactly the same thing. Stop working, tongue hanging out, breathing hard. So one of the things that people who are trying to get their dogs into a proper condition need to be able to do is to be able to tell the difference between those 4 ways of running hot, of which 3 of them have nothing to do with heat. So anyway, there's ways of nourishing a dog that will prepare him to have sustained energy for a long exertion, and that includes not only having the proper variety of carbohydrate sources to have large stores of glycogen, but also to have fat sources. Ideally, there should already be fat sources mobilized in the bloodstream, and there are different types of each one of these nutrients that cover different time frames. There's 2 more energy substrates other than carbohydrate / glycogen on the one hand. On the second hand, fat. On the third hand, you've got proteins. Proteins are readily turned into energy through a process in the body called gluconeogenesis, and that normally involves cortisol. Cortisol being the antithesis, in other words, the opposite of anabolic hormones. And I should have addressed this when I was talking about that, but I didn't, so I'll work it in now. Uh, the anabolic hormones that include testosterone, all the synthetic hormones, all the synthetic steroids, insulin, estrogen. There's a totally different category that is not about building body tissue like all the anabolic anabolic hormones are. The catabolic hormones, really there's only one major hormone in that category, and it's cortisol. Cortisol invokes the fight or flight response. Cortisol turns body tissue into energy. If you suddenly realize your house is on fire and you got 2 kids you got to save, and you've got to work explosively, and you do so, and you get your kids saved, and then you realize the woods are on fire too, and then you got to pick them up and run with them for 5 miles to save their lives. The way your body solves that problem is it releases a crap load of cortisol, which turns body tissue into energy, and gives you the energy that you otherwise would not have had to be able to accomplish an emergency task. So cortisol can work on body proteins to turn the body proteins into energy to provide a third energy substrate. The fourth is creatine. Creatine monohydrate will provide a fourth energy substrate, but only if you have it in your system. So it's a pretty good reason to have a little creatine monohydrate in your body or in your dog's body if you want them to be maximally fueled. So there's your 4 energy substrates, 4 things that had to make sure that they were in the RF1 product to be able to provide all the maximal fuels, to be able to run gas into your engine from 4 different tanks. But it goes beyond that. There are subtypes within each category. For example, in the in the carbohydrate category, what happens whenever you consume carbohydrates? Whenever I eat a biscuit, whenever I eat a bowl of pasta, the enzymes in my body will turn those carbohydrates, will break them down into simpler and simpler forms. And the ultimate form that is simple enough to be used immediately as soon as it goes into the bloodstream is glucose polymers. My source of glucose polymers in RF1 is maltodextrin. It's called 10-DE maltodextrin. DE stands for dextrose equivalent. It's how it compares with dextrose relative to its ability to provide energy. And so we do address that. We want the animal, as soon as he consumes our product, we want the dog, as soon as he consumes our product, to have something working to immediately elevate his blood sugar. But beyond that, on the carbohydrate level, we have more complex carbohydrates, so that we have a sustained source of carbohydrate energy. Glucose polymers get used up relatively quickly. The more complex carbohydrates help provide more sustained carbohydrate energy. With respect to fats, we have MCTs, medium chain triglycerides. Fat molecules are comprised of chains of carbon atoms, and the more complex fats have longer chains of carbon atoms. It takes more time for them to be broken down, provide usable energy. In the case of animal fats, full-fledged animal fats, you're looking at probably 3 to 4 hours from ingestion to the time that you can reliably count on animal fats to provide the fat energy necessary to fuel your animal after the glycogen runs out. The MCTs, medium chain triglycerides, shorter chains of carbon atoms, will provide fat energy within about 45 minutes after ingestion. So, well, let me cover proteins. Proteins, whenever they're broken down into their component parts, amino acids, they can provide energy rather quickly. I've experimented a lot with different amino acids. I started buying all different formulations of amino acids from a company called Unipro, from a guy who was a very intelligent member of the sports nutrition community back in 1980, 81, 82. Unipro came out with the very first amino acids back in those days, and Bob was their star representative. I got to know him. He actually was involved with the Chinaman dog. He was a great source of information, thought-provoking information, great source of research for me to get things rolling in my own understanding of nutrition. But anyway, I was able to get a variety of amino acid formulations, some of them that tasted just like pure chemical, but would just light you up with energy like you wouldn't believe. And so, yeah, we make sure that we provide quality proteins in the form of amino acids that have been with enzymes broken down into their component parts, so that it's just a very small step for the body to be able to use them as protein energy. And then we use full-fledged animal proteins like chicken liver, pork liver, both spray dried in the RF1 product to provide the more complex protein sources. Yeah, there's only one form of creatine that I'm aware of. There's not simple creatine for providing energy at a faster pace, and then complex creatine is just creatine. So there we have probably 10 different ways to contribute to fueling an animal, each with a different degree of durability, each with a different time period in which they're relevant. So it's complex, but the simplest thing you can do is add some RF1 to your dog's food every day, and it's all been thought through so that all the different permutations have been addressed in an efficient way. So that covers fueling. With respect to recovery, the most important thing to do is just to have a lot of protein, a lot of highly usable protein, a high caliber assortment of amino acids. You need to know which amino acids are essential and which can be built within the body from the essential amino acids. I think it's fair to say that you can do better than just providing the essential amino acids. I think if you provide a full range of amino acids, which is what we do with the RF1 product, you free the body of having to make their own amino acids, which is an intermediate step, and who knows which ones are done with sufficient efficiency. Maybe it takes time to transform some of these amino acids to build up the other amino acids. The simplest, safest, most efficient thing to do is provide all amino acids in the purest, most usable form, and that's what we do. So you look at what bodybuilders and athletes in general do. As the body gets more and more stressed, they'll go from what your minimum daily requirement is that's offered to us by our government is that this is sufficient, and everybody knows it's bullshit. That if you're doing anything serious, you need at least 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day, and if you're really getting after it and going for a world record, you better have 2 grams a day, so that your body has in abundance everything you need and doesn't have to wait for it or try to create it, or it's there waiting to be used. In terms of feeding fats, the body, the dog's body evolved to be consuming animal fats, and the only time I'm going to deviate from animal fats being a significant part of the dietary fat profile is if there's going to be a work activity that's imminent, and it's a very hard work activity in which there's not enough time to get enough fat into the dog to allow him to go through these hours and hours and hours of breaking it down. If I need to get some fat into him as quickly as possible, I'm going to use the MCTs, because they provide usable quality fat energy in a much shorter period of time. But in most cases, there's probably a lot of pathways that are addressed better by your full-fledged animal protein or animal fats. What have I left out about nutrition?
Well, probably some of just general nonsense that people have out there in terms of, like, I do this or I do this, I feed only raw, I feed only kibble, I feed only this, or I put this much liver, or I feed bones to my dogs, or all that general stuff. Like, and it seems like there's only 2 categories, which is like kibble with carbohydrates or just raw, and people have decided to get in those camps like Democrats and Republicans, instead of understanding that everything, there's gray areas everywhere, and just knowing when and how, and ask yourself the who, what, where, when, why, when, and how of what you're trying to do, and if you can help with that.
Well said. You're exactly right. So one of the things I didn't do was just actually say, here's what to feed.
Besides RF1.
I hit that pretty heavily.
Yeah.
And I've never been one to try to self-promote or to use an academic discussion as a way of promoting, going after profit. To me, truth is sacred, and I'm not trying to corrupt it. I'm just telling you truthfully that
it works.
Yeah, it works, and that's the only place I know where you can get any product like it that does work, and that's that comprehensive, and that's honestly it's why I made it, so I would have it myself. But I will tell you what I do, and some of this is just for ease, because I think it's sufficient. If I was going to prepare a dog for a hog hunt, it would be a mixture of raw and kibble, well, probably with the emphasis on kibble, but absolutely making sure that there was a couple of big scoops of RF1. The reason for that is, again, everything that's necessary for a dog to live at his highest level is in that RF1 product. And I will add that in order to make it as efficient as possible, so that I could capture the therapeutic level of every nutrient necessary for optimal health for a dog, but not have so many calories that a dog would inevitably get fat from consuming this product. I actually had to create a computer program that would, once I put the nutrient levels, every nutrient that existed in every ingredient that I intended to use or hoped to use. I was able to enter all that data into the program, and then I could change the percentages of the total product, or the percentages of each ingredient that comprise the total product, and view where we landed on every necessary nutrient, every vitamin, every mineral, every amino acid, every fatty acid. I could. You can't wrap your mind around 100 nutrients coming from about 8 or 10 ingredients and know exactly. I can't. Some of you might, but I doubt it. If I hadn't met you yet.
And in a scoop that's this big.
Yeah.
And not in like a bowl of 20 different organs and all this stuff that you see people, which I mean, yeah, cheers to them for taking the time to get liver and get bone and get greens and get eggs and get kibble and get raw and like all that stuff. Or you could just give you a scoop.
Yeah. Well, that's the biggest downfall of feeding raw, is that it would take a genius to be able to assimilate all the raw ingredients necessary to cover every nutritional requirement for a dog. There's going to be inevitably too much of this or not enough of that. And if you're going to feed raw, you need RF1. Put a couple scoops in with your raw food, and then you're guaranteed that every amino acid, fatty acid, vitamin, and mineral is present. RF1 is so well formulated that you can take, for a dog that requires 1,500 calories a day, you can take 500 calories of RF1 and add 1,000 calories of loaf bread, and your dog's got a balanced diet. So that just shows you how well targeted it is. So,
what would you say to somebody that says dogs just eat raw in the wild, so I can just feed my dog raw and it'll be fine?
You know, dogs have some choice in what they eat, and their taste bud mechanisms and their cravings do actually tend to direct us towards their insufficiencies.
Yeah.
And I don't doubt that dogs and wolves are the same. If you're craving something, there's usually a reason why. All these taste and craving things are programmed over time, and where they really get screwed up is, like, for example, if your kid, if you start feeding chicken nuggets when he's 3 years old, and he's getting some really crappy oils from McDonald's mixed in with it, his feedback system that is tasting these nuggets realize that, okay, well, these 7 amino acids are present, so since this is what's available, if we need those amino acids, we're going to select this. We're not going to know that there's toxins and everything's going along with it. So it's not a perfect system, but the way it in general works is your cravings and the foods you find acceptable have been found to have essential nutrients. So I think it's probably fair to say, if a wolf truly needs something that he's deficient on, he will be looking for it. He'll find himself, strangely enough, pulled towards that, whatever has that nutrition in it. But
I just don't see a whole lot of people feeding a whole deer or a whole elk with guts and everything to their dog when they say they feed raw. They just feed, like, if they feed a chicken quarter, well, yeah, that's great, but it doesn't have liver or heart or guts or any of that stuff in there. So
liver is one of the primary ingredients in the RF1 product, and that's because liver is so nutritionally rich in so many different things, vitamins and minerals and amino acids and fatty acids. It's just really, it's the richest, most nutrient dense part of an animal. But it seems like I've left something out here. But at the end of the day, you can do right by doing a mixture of kibble, RF1, and some raw meats. You can actually do just fine by doing just kibble, a high quality kibble. There's garbage kibble out there that nothing should eat. But a high caliber kibble with RF1, and you're in good shape. And dogs enjoy eating a raw chicken leg quarter. And don't underrate that. If you're keeping your dog happy, and I wouldn't say for a minute that there's not something in there that, in its raw state, is really truly supplying a need that doesn't otherwise get satisfied. I've just seen really good results using that combination. You know how we are here on Bulldog Hill. We start feeding. We still buy about 500 pounds of raw chicken leg quarters every week, and honestly, it's actually cheaper than dog food. There's not a good reason not to. It's not like you're wasting money or anything. And the way a 7-week-old pup attacks a raw chicken leg quarter is something to behold. They can actually break the bones at 7 weeks. I mean, you can come back, hang a few of those up in the pen, and come back, and it's gone.
And the amount of milk that a mother produces when she's eating.
Yeah.
Like, they'll eat the same amount of kibble they usually eat in 3 to 5 chicken quarters in a day, and puppies just blow up, and they just produce so much milk so fast.
Yeah, there's no better way to elevate a struggling mother's body weight and milk production than, as you just indicated, adding 3 to 5 raw chicken leg quarters to their diet every day. At 70 cents a pound or less.
Yeah.
So what do we pay for a 40-pound box of raw chicken?
40 pounds.
Somewhere around $30 a box.
$115 for 4. So
$29, right at $30 a box. So that's 75 cents a pound.
Yeah, I can't imagine the kibble's too far off from that.
Well, with us buying a tractor trailer load of value pack black bag that's 44,000 pounds at a time. I think we're paying in the neighborhood of $32 a bag for a 50-pound bag, of 64 cents a pound. So 75 versus 64, essentially the same price.
Yeah.
So each one is a tool, and each one serves its purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about hormones. We've talked about training methodology. We've talked about food as a fuel source and food as a means of rebuilding body tissue. I strongly recommend that you use RF1 in conjunction with your dog's diet, and we're recommending it for legal activities, moral activities, to promote longevity of life and health. And in this issue of the journal that has the 20,000 word article that addresses this from one end to the other, it's available at a very modest price, and I hope we've helped your ability to understand the principles necessary for being able to read the health and fitness of your dog in real time and of yourself. As I quickly scan the things that I didn't say, one thing I would say is there is a way of dieting that is very useful in adjusting weight quickly, and that is what's referred to the keto diet, or used to be called the Atkins diet back in the 80s. Basically, you're feeding virtually no carbohydrate. You're feeding almost exclusively protein and fat, and you don't have to hold back the fat. And really, you don't have to hold back the total caloric intake. In the beginning, whenever you're trying to get your dog down to within 2 pounds of his ideal weight, his performance weight, you could feed 2 cans of mackerel, which has no carbohydrate in it, and 10 boiled eggs, no carbohydrate energy there. And you can feed that every day, and the dog's going to feel relatively satisfied. And if you want to put a tablespoon of oil on top of it, or 2, or 3, or 5, the dog is going to lose weight. He'll lose weight at a pretty rapid pace, and that works on you too. That's the diet that I live on. Every now and then I have a cheat day whenever somebody lays a piece of apple pie in front of me, and I can't say no to it, and then I blow up, and then I have inflammation in my body, and all these processed foods, and that includes flour, promote inflammation. But in general, my food consumption every day is just straight protein and fat. I can eat cheese, no milk. I eat a lot of salmon, sardines, ground chicken, ground beef. Eggs, eat a lot of eggs. If I gotta have a snack, it's pork rinds. But yeah, I would weigh 40 more pounds than I do if I didn't eat like that. And anybody that's trying to lose weight, eat like that. You're gonna have a couple days of craving carbs, but as you get into it deeper, you will enjoy it. You'll enjoy the fact that you have the freedom to eat pretty much however much you want of these items that were normally forbidden. Just no carbohydrates. So, all right. Well, I hope this has been useful, and look forward to your feedback. We read and take to heart the feedback that you're kind enough to share with us. Sometimes criticisms are absolutely legitimate, and when they are, we try to modify the way we go about things or issue corrections. We're here to serve. So, anything you got to add to that?
I think we just did a great job of presenting like overall general principles.
Yeah.
From like conditioning, we went a little in depth in the conditioning stuff, and the nutrition, where you can see all the different energy sources. Like those are broken down into the 4 categories that you talked about. The conditioning is broken down into 3 categories that I talked about, and then the nutrition is broken down in these categories. We gave this big general overall idea of how nutrition and strength and conditioning and these things work, and I think it would be good to do the next episode. Like, I think that's a good baseline episode, and then the next episode is answering specific questions about the big general principles and topics that we talked about. So we will do that if there's a bunch of specific questions, if you're up for it, and if there's a bunch of specific questions at the bottom of this, because I know a lot of this is probably brings up very specific questions.
Yeah.
And so if you guys pile on some specific questions, then we'll have another one that's just based solely on that.
Sounds great. I think you're right on target. To give an example of what I would ask if I had just listened to all this stuff, I would, or something that I feel like just in contemplating all that has been said, there's probably a number of things that I could bring up right now, and I'll bring up one of them, and that is, so if you're in your final week preparing for your hog hunt, and you're trying to figure out how much oil to have in your diet. Well, if you got a work day coming up the next day, then you'll probably want to put a tablespoonful of, say, flaxseed oil in the diet. So your dog's got a good amount of fat floating that's mobilized in his circulatory system, feeding the muscles so that there's fat energy there, so that after 20 to 30 minutes of work he doesn't fall flat energy wise. But then if you got a rest day coming up, you don't need to do that. You don't need to add that additional fat for the necessary work is not going to be required for 3 days. But then before his actual hog hunt, then the last feed before that, you're going to want to put one or more tablespoons full of a high quality oil in there. So some of the stuff is still going to require you to think, and that's the whole idea, is to be able to prepare you to be able to be independent, so that if you go from one situation and then to another one is totally different, you'll be able to adapt. So whenever we were initially talking about this, I didn't go into the depth of detail, but I gave you the basic facts that would, if you applied yourself, you put your thinking cap on, you would have been able to reason that if he's struggling to make weight, or that you're having to tread the lines to be able to be at the ideal weight, that you would figure out that, okay, well, he's not working tomorrow, so I don't need the fat in the diet tonight. But he is working tomorrow, so he's got to have the fat for fuel for tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, the specific examples.
Yeah.
So like hopefully we gave information so you can figure out the specific examples. If you're interested in providing specific examples, this is what we do in research, right? Someone creates a scenario.
Mm-hmm.
If this is the scenario, what would you do in this scenario? And this is stuff you have to work through, and going through all the research and graduate school and stuff. So if you guys present us with scenarios, then Tom will take care of it and tell you what to do.
I'll do my best.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your help, Brad, here and on the yard, and as my friend, and thanks for stepping up to the plate with no notice.
Yeah.
Good job.
Well, give me some specific scenarios, based on, because my mind was just kind of going all over the place thinking about the general, just general energy systems that you work in, and but it wasn't chronological. I know chronologically people can understand things better, so you can just pick apart anything that I said and say, well, what if this or what if that, and I'd be happy to help best I can to create the correct solution for your problem.
So you're addressing that to our viewing audience.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Same here. We're here to try to create a world and a body of knowledge that ultimately leads to better lives for the most noble thing on the planet, as far as I'm concerned, the American Pit Bull Terrier.